The silence before truth. The courtroom was packed. Cameras clicked, voices whispered, and yet when Keanu Reeves entered, silence followed him like a shadow. He didn't walk like a man ready to fight. He walked like a man ready to speak his heart. Alexandra Grant sat across from him, her hands folded, eyes calm but heavy, with things unsaid. Everyone thought this was just another Hollywood trial, fame, fortune, betrayal. But no one in that room knew how much pain hid behind his quiet face. The judge called his name. Keanu stood slowly, his dark suit simple, his eyes tired but clear. He didn't need lawyers or scripts. He just looked at Alexandra and began to speak. His voice was soft, yet it filled the whole room. "I never wanted this," he said. "Not the cameras, not the headlines, not the noise. All I wanted was peace." Alexandra looked down, her fingers trembling slightly. Keanu's words weren't meant to hurt her. They were meant to heal something broken between them. People leaned forward, sensing something more than legal drama. It felt like watching two souls untangle years of love and misunderstanding. He continued, "You once told me silence can be love. But silence also destroys, doesn't it?" The judge paused, sensing that this was not an ordinary testimony. Even the reporters, ready with their questions, lowered their pens. There was a strange power in his honesty, raw, unfiltered, almost sacred. Outside the courthouse, people were already dividing sides. Some said Alexandra betrayed him. Others said Keanu abandoned her. But none of them knew the truth, that their love began in quiet places, built on mutual respect, and slowly cracked under the weight of fame. Keanu took a deep breath. "I made mistakes. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. I hid behind kindness because I didn't want to hurt anyone. But the truth is, kindness without honesty is still a lie." Alexandra finally looked up. Her eyes glistened. For a second, the world around them disappeared. No court, no audience, no judgment. Just two people who once promised forever, but got lost somewhere along the way. A murmur spread through the room. People could feel something shift, not in the case, but in their hearts. Even the judge's expression softened. Keanu's lawyer tried to interrupt, but he raised his hand gently. "Please let me finish." He looked back at Alexandra. "You taught me to paint with feeling, to see beauty even in broken things. But I never told you what your art did for me. It gave me hope. It reminded me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being real." A tear rolled down Alexandra's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. For the first time in months, she looked at him not as an opponent, but as the man she once believed in. Keanu's voice trembled slightly. "I didn't come here to win. I came here to be understood. If my silence hurt you, I'm sorry. But please know that everything I didn't say, I felt it deeply." The entire courtroom was still. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. This wasn't just testimony. It was confession, forgiveness, and truth, all wrapped in one man's humble words. When he sat down, Alexandra whispered something barely audible. "You never stopped being kind," she said. He smiled softly. "And you never stopped being brave." For a long time, neither of them spoke again. The judge didn't rush. The reporters didn't shout. It was as if everyone in that room had just witnessed something greater than justice. The kind of moment that reminded people what it meant to be human. And as Keanu lowered his head, the cameras caught something the world had rarely seen, a man known for his calm, now showing the deepest kind of courage, honesty outside. The sky darkened, and rain began to fall against the courthouse steps. People whispered, "Did you hear what he said?" And others replied, "He wasn't defending himself. He was defending love." No one left that courtroom unchanged, and this was just the beginning of the truth that would shake the world. The letter that changed everything. The next morning, the world couldn't stop talking about Keanu's words. Headlines filled every screen, every phone, every whisper in cafes and offices. People said it was the most emotional statement ever heard in a courtroom. But for Keanu, there was no victory in it, only an ache that refused to fade. He sat alone in his apartment that night, lights dim, rain tapping softly against the glass. The city outside was loud, but inside it was silent. The same silence he once called peace, but now felt like punishment. He reached for a drawer beside his chair and pulled out a small envelope, yellowed at the edges. It was addressed in handwriting he knew better than his own. To Keanu, if you ever forget why we began. He hadn't opened it in years. Alexandra had written it during the early days of their love, back when they painted together, laughed about meaningless things, and built dreams that seemed untouchable. He'd kept it hidden, maybe out of fear, maybe out of hope. His hands trembled slightly as he tore the envelope open. Inside was a letter, the ink faint but still alive. "You once told me that you don't believe in forever," it began. "But I do. Not forever in time, forever in meaning. If one day the world misunderstands us, I hope you'll remember this. Love doesn't end where silence begins. It waits patiently for courage." Keanu closed his eyes. The words hit like a wave. He realized that all this time, while the world debated their truth, Alexandra had already known what would matter most. Not fame, not pride, but courage. Courage to speak, to forgive, to let love change shape without losing its soul. His phone buzzed. His lawyer's name flashed on the screen. "The press wants another statement," the man said. "We can use this moment. People are on your side now." But Keanu only said, "This isn't about sides." He ended the call and sat still. In his heart, he knew what he needed to do next. Not for cameras, not for image, for closure. The next morning, he walked into the art gallery that once belonged to Alexandra. Most of her pieces had been sold or stored, but one painting remained, a soft blue canvas titled "The Space Between." It was their favorite. He stood there quietly, the scent of paint and dust filling the air. A young assistant recognized him and hesitated. "Sir?" "Miss Grant doesn't come here anymore," she said. He smiled faintly. "I know. I just needed to see this." The painting showed two figures standing apart, facing opposite directions, yet a thin golden light connected their hands. He had never understood what it meant until now. The space between, he whispered, was never distance. It was what kept us from breaking. His voice was barely a breath. Later that afternoon, Alexandra received a call from her gallery assistant. "He came?" the girl said softly. "He didn't say much, but he looked peaceful." Alexandra didn't reply at first. She simply stared out the window, the city lights flickering below. For months she'd felt anger, betrayal, exhaustion, but now there was only quiet understanding. She remembered the man who used to wait outside her studio for hours, not to talk, but just to watch her paint because he said it made him feel alive that night. She wrote something in her notebook. "Forgiveness is not saying it's okay. It's saying, I still see the good in you." The next morning, she made a choice that would surprise everyone. In court, day 2 began with tension. Reporters whispered that Alexandra might walk away from the case. Keanu entered, calm as always, carrying nothing but that old letter. Alexandra arrived moments later, dressed simply, no makeup, no shield. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them. Not reconciliation yet, but recognition. The judge looked confused when Alexandra stood up. "Your Honor," she said softly, "I have something to submit." The courtroom tensed. Keanu turned to her, his heart pounding. She handed the judge a folded paper. "This is my withdrawal," she said. "I no longer wish to continue this case." The room erupted with shock. Gasps, flashes, chaos. The judge tried to quiet the crowd, but Alexandra's calm voice cut through the noise. "This was never about winning or losing," she continued. "It was about finding peace." Keanu lowered his head, eyes wet. She looked at him one last time and added, "And I found mine." As she walked past him, she paused for a brief moment. He whispered, "Thank you." She nodded. "Don't thank me. Just live honestly this time." And then she left the courtroom, leaving behind reporters, headlines, and years of wait neither of them needed anymore. Keanu stayed still for a long while, the letter still in his pocket, the same letter that once spoke of courage, now fulfilled, outside, as cameras tried to capture his reaction. He simply said, "Love doesn't end, it transforms," and for the first time in years, his words weren't a defense. They were a beginning. The storm that followed peace, When Alexandra walked out of the courthouse, the world erupted. Some called her brave, others called her foolish. But Keanu knew. What she did took more strength than anyone could imagine. Still, peace in public doesn't always mean peace inside. 3 days after the withdrawal, a storm of rumors began to rise again. A reporter claimed to have secret recordings, twisting Keanu's words into lies. Another published private photos saying he had been acting all along. His team panicked. His lawyer said, "We can sue them." His manager said, "We need to respond now." But Keanu just looked out the window at the grey sky and whispered, "Let them talk." His silence confused everyone. "You're letting them destroy your name," his friend said. But Keanu wasn't silent this time because of fear. He was silent because he had learned something from Alexandra. Truth, he realized, doesn't need to scream. It just needs to stand quietly until noise dies. Yet even with all his calm, nights grew heavy. The hate online was constant. Cruel messages, mocking headlines, endless speculation. Sometimes he wondered if forgiveness was worth it. He would scroll through comments that said, "He's fake, he's manipulating sympathy, he's hiding something." But one night, as he sat on his balcony staring at the rain, he saw an old woman struggling with an umbrella. Without thinking, he ran down to help her. She smiled softly and said, "You're that actor, aren't you? The one people are talking about." He nodded, unsure what to expect. She placed her wrinkled hand on his. "Don't worry," she said. "They talked about Jesus too. When you walk with kindness, the world will always test your strength." Those words stayed with him. That night, instead of reading hateful comments, he opened a notebook and began to write. He didn't plan to publish it. It was just for himself. He wrote about pain, misunderstanding, the cost of silence, and the courage of forgiveness. Page after page, it poured out like confession and prayer mixed together. Meanwhile, Alexandra was far away, visiting her mother's old house by the sea. She hadn't spoken to the press once since leaving the courtroom. People begged her for statements, offers, interviews. She refused all of them. Instead, she painted again. Her new work had no sharp edges, no cold colors, just waves, stars, and open skies. One night, her assistant showed her an online article. It said, "Keanu Reeves seen helping an old woman during rainstorm. Refuses to respond to hate." Alexandra stared at the picture, him holding an umbrella, smiling softly. No guards, no ego. She whispered to herself, "He's still the same." And for the first time in months, she smiled, but fate wasn't done testing them yet. A week later, a major talk show invited Keanu to clear the air. His manager said, "This could fix everything." He hesitated, then agreed not to fix, but to speak truth one last time. When the night came, the studio was packed. Bright lights, polished floors, and a host eager for drama. The host began, "Keanu, millions watched your courtroom speech. Millions also think you're hiding something. Do you regret anything?" He paused. "Yes," he said quietly. "I regret being silent when I should have spoken truth sooner. I regret letting the world define love for me. But I don't regret loving her." The audience went silent. The host tried to change the topic, but Keanu continued, "What people forget is that pain doesn't always mean failure. Sometimes it means you care deeply. Alexandra and I, we broke, but that doesn't erase what was real." For a moment, no one moved. Then the audience started to applaud, softly at first, then louder. It wasn't the applause of fans. It was the applause of people who had been broken too, people who knew what forgiveness costs. After the show, as he walked backstage, a young staff member stopped him. "Sir," she said shyly, "I was going through a divorce. Your words tonight. They gave me peace." "Thank you," Keanu smiled gently. "Thank you for listening," he said. Later that night, he walked alone along the studio parking lot, looking up at the night sky. He whispered, "Maybe this was never about proving myself. Maybe it was about remembering who I am." Across the city, Alexandra painted under moonlight, her brush moving softly across the canvas. She didn't know why, but that night she painted a man standing in the rain, holding an umbrella for someone else. And though they were far apart, it felt as if the same wind passed between them. carrying words neither could say but both could feel, and so the world thought the story was ending. But for Keanu and Alexandra, it was only the calm before the real storm. The truth behind the photograph. 2 weeks passed. The storm around Keanu seemed to fade, but peace still refused to come. The internet had moved on, but he hadn't. Sometimes, the quiet after chaos feels even louder than the chaos itself. One evening, he sat on the edge of his bed, a pile of unopened letters beside him. Most were fan mail, some were hate. One, however, caught his eye. No return address, no name. Just a simple wax seal shaped like a wave. His heart skipped. Alexandra used that seal once, years ago, when they exchanged handwritten notes instead of texts. He opened it slowly, afraid of what it might say. Inside was a single photograph. It showed him years ago sitting on a park bench, feeding birds, the same picture that tabloids once twisted, claiming he was a lonely man hiding guilt. But at the back of that photo was handwriting, "You were never lonely. You were just peaceful." I see it now, no signature. But he didn't need one. He knew it was her. A warmth spread through him, the kind that didn't come from winning or being right, but from being understood. That same night, Alexandra was painting near the sea when her phone buzzed. She ignored it at first, but then saw a message from an unknown number. It said, "Thank you. I never knew peace could speak." No name, no photo, but she knew it was him. For a moment she put down her brush and stared at the horizon. The sky looked exactly like one of her old paintings, soft blue melting into gold. She whispered, "Maybe we're finally learning how to talk again." But fate, as always, had one more test waiting. A new article appeared online the next morning. It showed an edited photo. Keanu and Alexandra together, but manipulated to look like they were fighting violently in public. The caption screamed, "The truth behind their court truce, fake peace, secret betrayal." By noon, it had gone viral. His manager called in panic. "We can't ignore this one," he said. "People think it's real." Keanu didn't answer right away. He just stared at the fake image. The manipulation was obvious to him, but to the world, truth and lie often look the same. "What do you want to do?" The manager pressed. Keanu looked out the window and replied softly, "I want to tell the truth. Not to fight them, to free us." That night he posted a message online. No team-approved statement, no legal tone. Just a photo of the same park bench from years ago, and these words, "When the world doesn't understand silence, it invents noise. The picture you saw today is not real, but the peace we're trying to find is." The message spread everywhere. Millions shared it. Many praised his calm honesty. Some mocked him again. But this time, Alexandra decided not to stay quiet. She posted her own message, the first public one since the trial. It was a photo of her painting the space between, the one they both loved. And her caption said, "He's not lying. He never was." The world froze for a moment. 2 sentences. Yet they carried more weight than every article written about them combined. Within hours, journalists began retracting stories. One confessed the photo had been edited by a freelance photographer seeking attention. Others apologized. The truth finally surfaced, and the storm that had chased them for months began to fade. But something deeper happened that night. Keanu received a private message from Alexandra. It read, "Truth doesn't heal everything, but it makes healing possible," he replied. "Would you let me see your truth in person?" After a long pause, she answered, "Come to the gallery tomorrow, before it opens." The next morning he arrived early. The gallery was quiet, bathed in morning light. Alexandra stood near her new exhibit, a series called Rebirth. The walls were filled with paintings of storms turning into dawn, of faces half broken, half blooming. She turned when she heard him step in. Their eyes met. No court, no audience, no anger, just 2 people who had been through too much noise and finally found quiet again. He looked around and whispered, "These are beautiful." She smiled faintly. "They were born from pain," he nodded. "And then they're honest." For a long moment they just stood there and not touching, not speaking. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was gentle, like a deep breath after a long cry. Alexandra finally said, "I'm not ready to start again." He replied softly, "I'm not asking to start. I'm asking to listen." She looked at him for a moment, eyes glistening. "Then stay for a while." The storm's finally over, and for the first time in what felt like forever, they both smiled. Outside, the rain began again, soft, steady, not like a storm, but like a song. And somewhere deep in that quiet morning, love began to find its way back. The reunion that no one expected days turned into weeks after that quiet morning at the gallery. Keanu kept his word. He didn't rush her, didn't ask for more. Sometimes he would visit the gallery early, before the doors opened, and simply sit near the window while she painted. They rarely spoke, but their silence had changed. It was peaceful now, not heavy. One morning, she placed a cup of coffee beside him, without a word. He smiled. That small act said more than 1,000 apologies could. It was the start of something fragile, something real. Outside, the world was slowly healing too. People began to forget the rumors and started to remember the message he'd shared about truth, kindness, and resilience. The internet, usually cruel, turned gentle for once. A viral post read, "The man who never shouted, never blamed, just forgave." Still, Keanu's heart carried one last weight, the words he'd never said. He thought about them every night before sleep. He wanted to tell Alexandra everything, how losing her changed him, how silence had become unbearable, how forgiveness was the only reason he could still smile. But before he could, life interrupted again. A reporter discovered something new, a charity Keanu had been quietly funding since the court case ended. It supported young artists, paying their rent, giving them space to create without fear. One of them happened to be a student of Alexandra's art program. When she found out, she confronted him the next morning. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice a mix of surprise and warmth. He shrugged gently. "Because it wasn't about me. It was about what you taught me." She frowned softly. "What did I teach you?" He looked at her with that quiet honesty that always disarmed her. That creation is love in motion, and love shouldn't hide behind pride. For the first time since the trial, she stepped closer. "You've changed," she whispered. He smiled. "Maybe I just finally became who I was meant to be." The air between them grew still. She wanted to speak, to say something deep or poetic, but instead she just said, "Thank you," he replied softly. "No, Alexandra. Thank you for teaching me to see beyond pain." Their eyes met again, and for the first time there was no wall between them. No anger, no fear, just a quiet acceptance that what broke them had also built them. But fate still had one more turn to make. A week later, Alexandra's new exhibition opened, Rebirth. It drew hundreds of people, artists, journalists, even critics who once mocked her. When Keanu entered the room that night, the crowd parted instinctively. He wasn't there as a celebrity. He was there as a witness. The final painting unveiled at the event was titled "Truth Speaks Softly." It showed two silhouettes standing in the rain, their reflections touching even though their hands did not. The crowd applauded, moved by its emotion. When someone asked her what inspired the piece, Alexandra paused. Her eyes found Keanu in the crowd. She said, "Forgiveness, and the courage to be kind when the world is cruel." The audience went silent, and for a moment the room felt like that courtroom months ago, full of unspoken emotion. After the show, she walked toward him. "You came," she said. "I wouldn't miss it," he replied. She hesitated, then added quietly, "People think that painting is about us." "Is it?" he asked, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe it's about everyone who's ever tried to love and failed, but still believed in love again." He nodded slowly. "That's the most beautiful kind of love." A soft piano started playing in the background as the crowd began to leave. Keanu and Alexandra stayed where they were, surrounded by paintings glowing in warm light. She looked at him, her voice trembling slightly. "Keanu, if we start talking again, really talking, are you ready for what might come with it? The noise, the questions, the pressure." He thought for a long moment, then said softly, "I don't care about noise anymore. I only care about what's real. For the first time she smiled, not the polite kind, but the one he hadn't seen in years, the one that reached her eyes. He extended his hand. "Walk with me." She looked at it for a moment, then placed her hand in his. Together, they walked out into the night. No cameras followed, no lights flashed. The city around them buzzed quietly, unaware that a story the world had turned into scandal was ending in peace. Under a soft drizzle, Keanu opened his jacket slightly, covering her shoulder from the rain. She laughed gently. "And you always do that." "Some habits," he said, "are worth keeping." And for the first time in a long time, they didn't look back. The storm had ended. Not because they won against the world, but because they finally chose peace over pride, love over noise. And as they disappeared into the quiet city night, their story whispered one final truth, that sometimes the most powerful statements are not spoken in court, but lived in silence, kindness, and forgiveness. The speech that healed the world months past. The noise finally faded for good. Keanu and Alexandra had learned to live quietly again. No cameras, no statements, no headlines. They still walked the same streets, but this time they walked side by side. People saw them sometimes holding coffee cups, laughing softly. And though many took photos, neither of them minded anymore. Peace, after all, had become their rebellion. But then came an unexpected invitation, one that would bring their story full circle. A global art and film conference wanted Keanu to give a closing speech about honesty and humanity in art. At first, he refused. He didn't want attention again. But Alexandra looked at him and said, "This time your words might help someone else." So he agreed. The day of the event arrived. The hall was packed. Filmmakers, artists, journalists, and students from around the world. Everyone expected him to talk about movies, success, or fame. Instead, when Keanu stepped onto the stage, dressed simply in black, he began with silence. He looked at the crowd for a moment, his eyes calm, his presence grounding. Then he said quietly, "Months ago I stood in a courtroom trying to explain love. I thought I was defending myself. But now I know I was searching for truth." The hall grew silent. The weight of his words filled the air. He continued, "In a world that moves so fast, we forget how to listen. We react before we understand. We judge before we know. And we shout before we feel." He paused, then smiled faintly. "I used to think silence was peace. But silence without honesty is just fear wearing a mask. I learned that from someone who had the courage to speak when I didn't." In the front row, Alexandra sat watching him, her hands clasped tightly. He didn't name her, but everyone knew. He went on, "Forgiveness is not weakness. It's not saying what happened was right. It's saying, I won't let pain decide who I am. It's the most powerful art there is." A soft murmur rippled through the audience, the kind that comes when people feel seen. He took a deep breath. "We live in a time where truth gets edited, where love is judged by views and kindness is treated like a weakness. But I've learned something. When you tell the truth with your heart, it doesn't matter who believes you. It matters that you said it." He paused again. "There was a moment when I lost everything I thought I needed. But in losing it, I found something better, myself. And I found someone who reminded me that love doesn't end. It changes form, but it stays alive if you keep choosing it." His voice softened. "So to anyone who's been misunderstood, betrayed, or broken, don't let it turn you cold. Be kind anyway, because kindness is the only revenge that doesn't destroy you." The crowd was silent, not because they were bored, but because they were moved. People leaned forward, some with tears in their eyes. He smiled gently. "The world doesn't need louder voices. It needs gentler ones. It needs people who can say, 'I was wrong, I'm sorry, I forgive you.' That's real courage." He looked toward Alexandra. "And if someone ever taught you that love can survive truth, never forget them." The hall erupted in applause. People stood, cheering, crying. Cameras flashed, but this time he didn't mind. His message wasn't for fame. It was for everyone who had ever been silenced by pain and still dared to speak love again. After the event, Alexandra met him backstage. She didn't speak. She just wrapped her arms around him, holding on quietly as the noise of applause echoed through the walls. He whispered, "Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't." She smiled softly. "Thank you for finally speaking when the world needed to hear." They stayed like that for a long moment, two people who had walked through misunderstanding, judgment and loss, only to find peace not in proving, but in forgiving. Later that evening, they went for a walk along the waterfront. The city lights danced on the surface of the water. Alexandra stopped, looking out at the reflection. "It's strange," she said. "The court was supposed to break us. Instead, it made us honest." Keanu nodded. "Maybe that's what truth does. It hurts first, then heals," she smiled. "And now?" He looked at her, his eyes full of calm warmth. "Now we live." She took his hand. And together they kept walking, quietly, peacefully, through a world that finally understood them not as a scandal, but as a story of endurance, compassion, and redemption. As they disappeared into the night, the rain began again, gentle, forgiving, like the final applause of the universe itself, and somewhere inside that endless rhythm of falling drops, their love, tested, scarred, but reborn, kept beating softly, because sometimes the loudest truth ever spoken is simply a heart choosing to forgive.